Thank you very much, Shankavi. I'm going to introduce today's speaker. So good evening, everyone. Our speaker this week is Sandy Robb DTM with a speech entitled What's in a Number? Do you ever stop to consider how much of our lives are based on numbers? From the time of our birth to the time of our death, almost everything we do has a number associated with it. Some numbers are in the form of times, dates, or years. Some are forms of identification. Some represent gains or losses or identify where we fit in as compared to others. Sandy Robb is a Toastmaster, adventurer, and wannabe writer. In sharing some of her life's experiences with us, she will illustrate how numbers play a big part in defining who we are. She asked the audience to think of some of the numbers that have been significant in your lives and to share your thoughts during the discussion period. Please help me welcome Sandy Robb.
Thank you, Eunice. Try to think of a portion of your life that isn't connected to a number. From the minute we're born, and in my case, that was 3:15 a.m., December 20th, 1948, weighing in at 8 pounds and 8 ounces. My poor mom. From the time we are born to the time we die, and in my case, fortunately, that number is not yet determined, numbers play such a huge part in who we are and who we become. And it doesn't matter whether you're a math whiz or someone who has trouble figuring out how much tip to leave. Our thoughts, our actions, and even our perspective is governed in some ways by numbers. Just a few general ways to think of numbers. One of our numbers is time. Time to get up, to go to school, time to go to work, how long our commute time is, what point in time will COVID restrictions be over, and how long do we have to sit on hold when we call some businesses. Another, of course, is age and dates. It's so significant: birth dates, death dates, life events. The time we're old enough to vote or maybe get our driver's license, or maybe young enough to have saved enough to retire comfortably. Another number is distance. How far do we have to travel? How many kilometers did I put on my Fitbit today? And then there's always weight. How much do we weigh? And how much should we weigh? How much can we lift or carry? And that's important when we're lugging groceries home by hand. Then there's counting or categories. How many close friends or family members can we count on in our lives? How many medals has our Olympic team won? How many pairs of running shoes do I really need in my closet? And of course, money is a number that needs no explanation, especially, as in most cases, if we have too little. And then there's comparison, as in averages, average lifespan, or grades. Like the time I got 98% on my test, and my dad asked what happened to the other 2%. The list of numbers goes on. We know our lives are tied to numbers, but have you ever considered that our prejudices may be based on numbers as well? For example, do we categorize or stereotype people because of a number like their age? Unfortunately, I've been guilty of that all my life. I was really young when both of my parents died, and for the most part, my uncles and aunts died at an early age as well. I never knew any old people, and that limited knowledge caused me to make some wildly incorrect assumptions. What I remember of my grandmother is from a child's viewpoint. She wore her white hair in a bun. She had glasses with lenses that were as thick as the bottom of a pop bottle. She was stooped and slow moving and spoke slowly. And she always wore a black dress with a black lace collar, and even in summer, a heavy black sweater, thick brown cotton stockings, and sensible black shoes. To me, she was ancient. In reality, when she died, she was younger than I am now. From my limited perspective, all old people were frail, unfashionable, and not very friendly. I wish I had had other role models, because my whole outlook on older adults was prejudiced by a memory of my grandmother and folks like her. I got married when I was 20. My mother-in-law, Gwen, and most of her friends were in their late 30s, early 40s. They had all been quite young when they had their kids. Gwen loved to host parties, and often on Saturday night, that meant her friends and our friends would gather in her rec room and party and dance the night away. I used to look at her friends and think, I'm so surprised these old folks have enough energy to spend the whole night dancing. You'd think they'd be ready for bed long ago. And I'd look at the women and think, those poor old ladies. I'll bet some of them were even really attractive when they were young, but look at them now. If only I knew. I associated the age of 60 as being on death's doorstep. And I even used to wonder why old people at work didn't retire to make room for us young folks. Intolerance is born of ignorance, and it's embarrassing to admit how truly ignorant and intolerant I was. Fortunately, as I've aged, I've met some people who have kicked my notions of aging stereotypes right in the butt. I was in my early 30s and in my first job as a team leader. Gary, one of my team members, was every supervisor's dream and nightmare. He was so smart. He caught on to all the new processes quickly. He was flexible. He was the first one up to speed on any changes in the department, and he was always available to help everybody else get going. With a quick mind like that, was a quick challenge, or a quickness to challenge anything he disagreed with. I remember one day I was going through a process change with him that he disagreed with, and we ended up in a pretty heated discussion with me trying really hard to reinforce my point, and he was pushing back just as hard. Finally, he threw up his hands in defeat and said, well, maybe when I'm as old as you are, I'll see things differently. He was 22. I was 32. I've heard the saying that old is 10 years older than you are. That was sure true in that case. When I was in my mid-40s, my friend Sue had to go into the hospital for surgery. And back in those days, they kept you in for quite a few days, not like now where they release you a day later. And she was in a semi-private room with a really wonderful older lady. And I still remember that lady's name today. Her name was Mrs. Stong. And I don't know why she was in the hospital, but her hair was always done beautifully. And I don't remember ever seeing her without makeup. She was so pleasant and friendly. One day when I went to see Sue, Sue wasn't in her room. And Mrs. Stong said to me, don't worry, she's just gone down to have some x-rays taken. Mrs. Stong went on to say to me, I'm so glad that Sue is my roommate. She's such wonderful company. The lady that was in that bed before Sue arrived was quite ill. They took her for tests one day and she never came back. The nurse told me later that she had died. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Was she very old? And Mrs. Stone was indignant and said, oh, my dear, no, she was only 87. Talk about putting age into perspective. I've often wondered how old Mrs. Stone was. When I was in my 50s, I reconnected with an aunt who had lost touch over the years, or I had lost touch with over the years. And although my relatives lived very short lives, Aunt Helen was my aunt by marriage, and longevity was definitely in her genes. My favorite photo of her, and I look at it so often, is when she was in her early 90s. She's wearing a light blue flowered house dress and it's tucked up around her thighs. And she's sitting astride my cousin's motorcycle. Her steel gray curls peek out from under her Harley Davidson headband. And she's kind of looking back over her shoulder with a saucy grin that says, "Catch me if you can." She was such an inspiration to me. She was in her late 90s when she moved out of her house and into a senior's residence, not because she was frail, but because she was tired of doing housework all the time. She spent her time teaching seniors to knit and paint and do handicrafts. She said to me that old people need to do something with their hands to keep busy. It never occurred to her that she was older than most of those old people she taught. Now that I'm in my 70s, I'm on the trailing end of the age scale. I was so insulted the first time some young clerk in the Hallmark card shop asked if I wanted the senior's discount. What was she thinking? I hadn't even turned 60. I wasn't old. Also, I think I was pretty abrupt with the first young fellow who offered me his seat on the bus. Time changes everything. Now I accept the senior's discounts with a smile and think of the money I'm saving. And I'm also thankful that the young folks are so courteous, and I accept that seat on the bus with a heartfelt thank you. I'm still highly insulted when younger people treat me like I'm frail, forgetful, and faltering. I guess that's the way people in my past felt when I was so judgmental toward them. I often think of the quote by a woman named Terry Pratchett. Inside every old person is a young person wondering what happened. There aren't a lot of positives to aging, as the numbers remind us daily that our time here is finite. But with age comes experience, and hopefully some wisdom and acceptance. We've discovered what's truly important in our lives. It's too bad it took so long. I finally realized that there is no one number that fits all, and that each number in our lives is significant. Regardless of our age, some days we feel like a 1. Some days we feel like a perfect 10. But most important to me is that each of us is unique, and the numbers in our lives have helped us to become who we are. Back to you.